Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Movement and Medicine podcast, episode 24. I'm your host, Kevin Carr, joined by my amazing co-host, Brendon, who we haven't seen in a couple weeks here. And we have a very special guest today, the fitness podcast OG, if you will, none other than Anthony Renna of the Strength Coach podcast. Anthony, thank you for joining us here tonight.
Absolutely. It's you guys were, this is the 15-year anniversary month that we're kind of celebrating. And you guys, I always remember kind of in the early days and when you guys had the Strength House. Yeah. Right. And, Anna telling me how, you guys would be listening to it in the house and everything. And it's just, I always think of that piece of it, like the impact of, over the years, it's pretty cool to be on with you guys and see how far you guys have come. And then here we are.
Yeah. Full circle.
We're a couple podcasts behind. We're a few podcasts behind.
Yeah. We'll catch up. Right. Well, first and foremost, I know Anthony traditionally does Whiskey Wednesday, and he's really been on a roll. And so we figured this is a Wednesday night. It's 8:30 here in Boston. And so Brendon's a little on the earlier side out in California. So we continue the Whiskey Wednesday. So we have to have a toast to begin the night here. So I will take my Woodford Reserve here.
I got some Blantons.
Yeah, and I've got Blantons as well.
And we'll pour. And, first and foremost, cheers to 15 years of the Strength Coach podcast. Unbelievable. Really. Anthony was doing podcasts before it was cool.
Is it cool now?
Yeah. Hey, you've been at it longer than anybody. So I know we, when, the 15th anniversary came up, and I texted Brendon and said, I think it'd be great to have you because you have so much perspective on all the years you've talked to. I mean, how many episodes in 15 years?
Right now, technically I'm on 347, but as you guys know, I always did the special episodes. So technically I've done like 415 of the Strength Coach podcast.
It's unbelievable.
I was going to say, there's a bunch of halves in there, a bunch of 0.5s.
Yeah. So 347 from the regular episode, and then the 0.5s. By the way, the 0.5s were meant to just tell my listener this will not be, because we always had a lot of segments, right from the start. Ask Gray Cook, hit the gym with a strength coach, the coach's corner, and then eventually, results fitness and athletes performance. Now it's the gym, the business secrets with Vince Gabriel and Perch segment. Now the anomaly segment, right? So that was always all these segments. So all the 0.5 was to say, hey, we're going to do something special, something different today. So if you're expecting to hear Mike or Gray, you might not hear.
Yeah. And so, I mean, kind of rewind all the way back to the beginning. Like I said, you were doing it before podcasts were cool. Like everybody has a podcast. Now podcasts have become a huge part of our industry. But 15 years ago, it was definitely not as common of a thing for people to produce their own podcasts and have interviews. And you really kind of opened that world up. So like for you, what led you to start it? And what was that like first kind of starting to do interviews all the time and starting to really do fitness podcasting early?
Yeah, well, I knew early on that I needed some additional revenue streams, right? I knew this, just from the perspective of, don't forget, I got into the business when I was 37. Right. So I was in the bar business and the restaurant business for that long, and I didn't get into fitness now 18 years, I'm 55. So I didn't get into it until I was 37. So I had some business experience as well, and knew, like, just looking at this, I was like, this isn't, you cannot make a living here, at Equinox. And that's not knocking Equinox. It's just any gym, right? Being a trainer. So I knew, listening to some of the marketing gurus, whatever, additional revenue streams. And I bought a Mac because I kind of saw video coming, with YouTube. I was like, this is, I'm hearing all these great things about YouTube and video. So I bought a camera, I bought a Mac, but on the Mac, it had GarageBand. And under GarageBand, it said podcast. And I was like, oh shit, what is this? So I started listening to podcasts about podcasting, and I bought Podcasting for Dummies. And at the time, I had a golf fitness site. So I was my side hustle was like this golf fitness product. So I would sell all these fitness products for people and have articles and have a list of golf fitness professionals. And then TPI came out. And so it was kind of like this whole conglomeration. So I started the Better Golf with Fitness podcast. And I did that really for about a year before I started the Strength Coach podcast. So what happened was when we were all on michaelboyle.biz, which was just a forum for, that was it. It was a forum, a free forum. And it was Charlie Weingrove and Mike Potenza and Brandon Marcello and Dave Tenney and Patrick Ward. And these guys were really kind of nobodies, right? And, Sean Skane, all these guys that now just entered the NHL or just getting their big jobs. And, they were all Mike disciples, right? And so what a great forum. And what happened was there was sportspecific.com and it was downhill. Ryan Lee was trying to sell it. He tried to sell it to Chris Parrier. And Chris Parrier said, you know what? You should just give half to Mike Boyle and let Mike, take it over. He's got a good following. So that's how strengthcoach.com got started. But what happened was everybody on michaelboyle.biz got pissed because we had this great thing going, like really good controlled conversations, no trolls, no anything. And everybody was so pissed because they were like, Mike, we got a good thing. Now you're selling out, right? Like, we got to pay $10 a month, It was like, so Mike was actually going to give everybody 3 months free, and it ended up being 6 months because he had to appease all these people that were like freaking out. He's like, all right, I'll give you 6 months. You're going to love it, And I didn't look at it like that. I was like, I'll pay $10 to be close to this guy. Cause like I knew, I had I had already started a relationship with Mike, went to Functional Strength Coach 1, met him at Perform Better, went to, I got him to come to Frank Dolan's place. I hooked him up with Geraldine Cooper Smith. So Geraldine's hiring him for Equinox. So like I had this good relationship with Mike. And so I had the Better Golf with Fitness podcast. And I said, Mike, I got a great way to promote strengthcoach.com. And I said, it's called the podcast. I don't worry about what it is. All you got to do is answer the phone twice a month. Right. And I actually went
That's
up
even
to,
more impressive that you got Mike to answer the phone and talk for that long. Twice a month.
Well, you know what it was too? Because he, if you guys listen to those old episodes, they were always in his car.
Yeah.
They were always in his car. So
driving to BU.
It sounded horrible. Yeah, that's exactly. Remember, he was
driving to BU. Yeah.
So they were always in his car, and but I said, Mike, we'll talk about the site, we'll talk about what's happening, we'll talk, and I knew, like, I was using Mike, not using him, but I knew from michaelboyle.biz that I had good connections, through those guys, but I could say, Mike, can you call this coach? Can you get them on the show? No problem. So I drove up to Providence. I talked to Chris Parrier. I said, I got this idea. And, I monetized it from day one, which is really the key for what I was doing. Now, if you're just trying to educate, you guys have a lot of side hustles. So you can mention Certified Strength Coach. You can mention strengthcoach.com. You can mention mbsc.tv on here. And those are all things that you're going to benefit from. At the time, I was really just like, hey, I didn't own strengthcoach.com at the time. It was Mike and Ryan Lee. And I just wanted to, hey, Chris, you'll pay, this much money for episode and you'll be the main sponsor. And that's how it started.
Amazing. Yeah. A big chunk of Mike's interviews were probably on 93 South or 93 North heading down to Agganis Arena. And it's just funny how he's continued the in the car videos to this day. That's probably where he's done most of his educating, now that you think about it, is from the front seat of the car.
I never thought of that, Kev. I never even made that connection to it.
Yeah.
But by the way, that's in my lecture that I did Perform Better. That was kind of 2 lessons there. Is the answer to every unasked question is no. So it doesn't hurt to ask. Everybody, go ask. Ask if you have something, if you want to do, if you have an idea. I'm not just saying go say, hey, do you want to do this? Back it up, come up with a plan, and go there prepared. And that's number one. So you can't be afraid to ask. You got to have that courage to go out there and do that. But also, you have to keep your eyes open for opportunity. When everybody was complaining about the $10 a month, I saw it as like, hey man, it's $10 to, stay close to Mike and to make sure I'm in on this. And then, when I asked them, it was a no-brainer, right? Because I already developed a relationship with him. So,
and it's amazing some of those old forum threads, how good they are. Like when you go back, we still have all the old ones kind of bookmarked and saved. I think like Dave Teddy talking about energy system stuff, or Charlie talking about, rehab stuff. And they're hundreds of posts long, and long posts. Like if you are someone who paid like $10 a month and you went and you just read some of those classic threads, that's like how we got a lot of our education, right? Is either listening to the podcast or going on and like going through the threads. When we go back to the strength coach house, me, Brendon, Anna, Henry, Ricky, our non-strength coach roommate at the time, who we subjected to listening to this all the time. And we would go through and pour those. That was like our base education in the business. And so there's you said there were heavy hitters that were on there, especially back then, who turned into becoming these great, impact.
There's a conditioning article. There's a conditioning article, I think, that was started by Dave Tenney that is incredible. I think it's almost like 12 pages long, but everybody who was on there chimed in at some point. Anthony, real quick, I'm curious to know a little bit about how technology has changed for you in podcasting over the last 15 years. Because I remember, I think, when the first episode I was ever on, we did Skype. And I forgot Skype was even a thing.
So here's I literally just talked to Kevin about this before you got on. And here's the funny thing. Okay. Here's the funny thing. 2 weeks ago, I changed from Skype to Zoom. So I've been doing Skype, and I will tell you, Skype has been amazing. So there's nothing wrong with Skype still. It's just, people had different platforms. People want to do video. I didn't really have the need for video for so long. Now I'm kind of like, hey, this might be better to use as like advertising or snippets or whatever, right? For that type of stuff. So, and then also it's a logistic thing. Like right now, I don't have a podcast studio like I did in New York. Now I rent from a co-working space, so I have to reserve that. And then it becomes a pain in the butt, like just from that perspective. And the sound on these things now, I have these crappy earbuds in, but they're probably going to sound just as good as if I was in that studio, for Christ's sake, right? And so it's funny that you just asked that. So I literally, and Brendon, that's a funny thing. People are like, oh, you're so technologically advanced, so I could never do that. I'm like, guys, I got Podcasting for Dummies. I've been using Audio Hijack Pro from day one to record the calls. Okay. So up until 2 weeks ago, I was using Skype from day one, the same platform. So I never changed. So, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Right.
Yeah. And going back to almost your point about like by asking any question you don't ask is no. Right. And even to yourself and saying that like, all right, I can figure out how to podcast. Right? Like you were in the bar business before this. I'd venture to guess you didn't have a lot of media skills prior to starting a podcast, but you just started, right? And
people skills.
Yeah. But you just started. And I think most people don't realize, they think that when everyone starts a podcast or starts a YouTube show or even starts any business, that they have some sort of acumen in those avenues beforehand, but it's really not the case. And then you can grow something all of a sudden 15 years later, you got 400 episodes under your belt.
Yeah. And look, the things that podcast has led me to, I mean, I started strength and conditioning webinars. Okay. And you want to talk about another one with technology. That was when GoToWebinar first came out. I said, holy shit, like I got all these connections. Here's what I'll do is I'll call Brendon and say, hey, can you want to do, I'll give you $250 to do your lecture that you've already done. You've been on Perform Better. So I'll give you $250, do a webinar, right? People are doing that for free still to this day, but I was giving them $250 a webinar. And I had a monthly membership thing and people were getting CEUs for them. So I came up with that idea, but I knew nothing. I went bananas trying to figure out recording and where the recording, and you guys have dealt with this because when you took over strengthcoach.com, you probably saw some of the videos from the webinars that really aren't even available anymore because of the way they were recorded, right? So things have changed from that perspective, but I knew nothing about that. So with GoToWebinar too, and that led to really, I merged it into strengthcoach.com and Mike bought out Ryan and gave me a piece, and then I bought into it as even more. But that was part of my, like, hey, I have this too, like, so Mike, we took it all under that umbrella. But to your point, people just use that as an excuse not to do stuff.
Yeah, it's unbelievable
You were doing webinars and YouTube before it was cool too.
Yeah.
YouTube, not so much. I never really got to the video piece of it, because the podcast just kind of came in and was like, bam, hit me in the head. I was like, this is more my style right now, I get to talk, so.
Joe Rogan's made it popular, I think.
Well, what's really made it popular, honestly, was the iPhone. Mm-hmm. And the reason why was because if you think about it, in 2007, when we started the Strength Coach podcast, you had to download the podcast. For the most part, you could have listened on your computer as well. Okay. But you had to download it onto your iPod. Like smartphones really weren't around at the moment. So you had to download it on your iPod. And then in the car, you had to put it through your cigarette lighter or whatever, right? Like some connection. And then you could listen to it in your car. But so basically, that was a huge piece of it was that, that's why you knew the listeners were really hardcore because they had to go through, they had to jump through hoops. But once the phone came, everybody had the podcast, like, boom. Let me just see. My podcast is right here. Also, you can scroll and get rid of any ads or, like for me, segments, I know everybody doesn't love all the segments, but I don't care about that. Like I know somebody out there is getting something from the business segment. I know somebody's getting something from the, starting velocity-based training segment or like I don't need to be everything to everybody, but like I know somebody's going to take a piece of that. And when it's time, they might go back and say, now I'm opening a gym. I'm going to go back and listen to all the Cosgrove and the Vince Gabriel. So I don't really look at it like that, but to your point, like the fact that you can scroll and fast forward now easily, that's where everybody was like, oh, this shit's easy now too. It's easy to do a podcast or produce it, right?
Mm-hmm. And I think the result too, now that you, over the years, the amount of connections as a networking tool that the podcast has been for you, like you said, you kind of started with the kind of core group with Mike Boyle, is like the people that he was connecting to, but the amount of people that you now have kind of that you're friends with that have become in your network now because of this podcast that you've had is actually unbelievable. When you look at the list of guests that you've had, it's actually kind of remarkable.
And it's kind of cool when you call somebody and they're, you say, hey, like I had Danny Foley on, he's coming on, I interviewed him already. You guys, once he got to MBSC, and Mike had told me about him for a while, and what a great guy. And you get these guys on, these young guys been around for 10 or 15 years, but they're just kind of coming into their own from the perspective of putting themselves out there. And they're just like, oh, what an honor to be on and whatever. I was listening back, whatever. And that's kind of the cool piece too, is that you still get that. Not only the legendary like Al Vermeil and Gray Cook and Mark Verstegen and Mike Boyle, but then all these up and comers, and you guys included in that, like from that whole start. Now look at you, you're fucking legends.
Yeah, remember Brendon when you got the first email from Anthony, you got the call up to be on the podcast for the first time.
Yeah. I went around and told everybody. I was pumped. Yeah. Marco, I think you and Marco did the same thing, but was I first?
We'll have to scroll back and look at the episodes.
Scroll back and see who was the first.
Well, what's remarkable too is that you turned essentially a lot of your interviews became your book. as well. Like your book, I think I would venture to guess was really born out of a lot of the people that you had on the podcast and had interviews with. And then you talk about your book a little bit. That is really kind of a crowdsourced version of a lot of the conversations you've had on the podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, that was another thing when I said before, what the podcast has led me to was being able to, kind of come up with this idea. I needed a lead magnet. I had sold the gym and I was kind of going to expand on strengthcoach.com, Body by Boyle, or NBSC.TV now, whatever at the time. Expand on the podcast, make it like the focus. And then I said, I need a lead magnet to capture people's email addresses. And I said, I'll come up with something that people know me for, interviewing, but let me change it because they can listen to training about that on the Strength Coach podcast. Let me do something different. So that's why I said, success in the fitness business. So when I did those 5 interviews with Boyle, Jeremy Coopersmith, Don Saladino, Ron McKeefrey, and Alan Cosgrove, I said, I really should transcribe these because I should probably have it as a bonus, as a PDF. Then I was like, wait a minute, this would probably be a really good book. So I made a list. I had one of those boards where I wrote down, I actually got out iTunes and saw all my guests. So Kevin, to your point, I thought of them first, who do I know is going to answer my email?
Yeah.
And then I just wrote all these names down, probably wrote 60 or 70 names down and started to pare that down on I needed to make sure I had women represented. I needed to make sure I had, different sections of the fitness industry represented, physical therapists or trainers or strength coaches. So, but yeah, that's the only reason why I was able to do that was because of the podcast.
Yeah, and it's an amazing reference for young people, like you said, who are thinking about how do they build a career, what path they want to go to, because you have a wide variety of people in there from, professional strength coaches to business owners to, a little bit of everything in there, really, that give a lot of different perspectives on the same general career, right? And so I think if you go through that as a young person, you can come out of there with a lot of really valuable information, and it's delivered in a way that it's like, hey, I can pick it up and read one interview at a time. It's almost like a coffee table book in that, let me pick up this one today. And that's kind of how I looked at it to get the most out of it.
Yeah, or like a bathroom book. You could read, one chapter. In the
I was trying to say coffee table. Yeah. I was trying to, you would.
That's where my coffee table is. Is that not where your guys' coffee table is?
The problem is the bathroom now. It's everyone has their phone now, so it's like bathroom books are just forgotten about. But I remember you used to have the stack on the back of the toilet.
There you go. And so, yeah, I mean, that's the thing too. Is what I tried to do was with that book was that idea was, hey, here's a list of the be likes, and the be likes are just action steps or challenges based on one takeaway from the interview. So, hey, here's a list of the be likes. Where are you? In Boyle speak, which bucket is empty, right? If you have an empty bucket, go to that, read that chapter, do the exercise or challenge, right? And so I wanted it to be this kind of flexible, moving book where you didn't have to feel like you could be like, I love Gray Cook, or I love Mike Boyle, or I love Kevin Carr, Brendon, whatever. I'm going to read their chapter, right? And so that's how I wanted it to be presented, and that's kind of the way it came out. But speaking of young coaches with good resources, I say, honestly, I really mean this, and that's why I got the Blantons out tonight, because it's a special day, with you guys, because for me, you guys are the model of how this shit should be done. It's, put your nose down, work your ass off, do your internships, make your connections, pay your school loans off early, yep. Right? I mean, and now look at you guys, Brendon has Train Smarter, Not Harder. He has his own gym, among other things. Kevin, if people don't know, you're moving into your ownership of NBSC. You guys have certified strength coach. You took over strengthcoach.com and NBSC from me. we were talking about on the text, like building the empire, right? But this is the model. You guys are striving. You might look at it like, oh, you guys got it made, but it's not. Behind the scenes, it's a lot of work. And it's really the way it's done. It's not this Instagram, hey, let's do an online program and whatever. You guys are the model for how this should be done. So before you read my book, study these two clowns.
and it's funny.
Thanks,
so I'm 35. Thank you very much. Brendon's 34. And you realize we've been doing this for a long time. Like I had my 21st birthday at Mike Boyle Strength and Conditioning. And so, you realize I'm like, well, that was 14 years ago that I've been here. And so, I think a lot of people, especially now in this industry, like you said, Instagram fitness, people want to be the Instagram fitness person tomorrow. They want to be successful tomorrow. And that, when we were living in the strength coach house and Brendon wouldn't let us turn on the heat and we weren't making a lot of money. And, we were coaching at 5 a.m. and we were coaching at 9 till 9 p.m. There was a lot of work there, but then, hey, we'd be excited. We got to go to Perform Better in, 2012 and hang out and drink beers with, Gray Cook and Mike Boyle and Dan John and all these people that were there. And now you fast forward 14 years, there's a lot of work in building the slowly that went on. And you look back and you're like, wow, we actually did a lot in that time. And I've developed relationships with these people from, taking the time to do those things. And I always try to tell our young coaches who I forget that they're that much younger. Like I met with the interns today and they're 21 years old. And I tell them listen, just come to work every day, continue to look for ways to get better, look for opportunities to help grow the gym like we always try to do. And you'll be here by the time you're in your early 30s and you're going to be in a really good place. But it's hard sometimes for them to kind of not want to jump ahead and not want to get anxious. So you got to be patient. And that's probably the biggest cliche around, but I think it's true.
And if you look at the two of you, I think we can look at a couple things. Number one, obviously the discipline, and that was Brendon probably cracking the whip there with the expenses he knew, but it's the growth mindset. Number one, what's the first thing you just said? We were so lucky to go to Perform Better, right? Yeah. And learn. What's the second thing you said? And hang out with legends like Anthony Renna. Actually, you didn't say anything. Dan John but you guys you were building those relationships as well. And the third thing that you said was really, the service idea. You were thinking of the gym first. Okay. And I'm not saying, right, if you Cialdini's book on influence, right, one of the things is about reciprocation, right? And so when you do things for people, and that doesn't have to be your motive, if I do something for these guys, they're going to do something for me. But, believe me, when I got Mike I called Mike to say, hey, we want you to come down to Frank Dolan's. We're going to give you $2,000 and give you a piece we're going to buy 35 of your books and whatever. And then I
thought you were going to say beers.
No beers.
35 beers.
Yes. And then it was, it's the rider. We'll have some Bud Light in your green room. And then it was oh, Mike. And also here's Geraldine Cooper-Smith and she's hiring, she wants lectures and then, hey, Mike, I got a great idea. It's not going to cost you anything for your podcast. So the more you're doing, and then Mike Mike gave me 10% of strengthcoach.com. So if anybody doesn't know that, when he bought it, he gave me 10%. I bought 15% after that. But by the way, I really didn't buy it. Mike let me pay it off with my share of the profits, which was really his money. So it was kind of a joke, but Mike did that because of what I perceived, the help that I had given him. I always kind of was behind the scenes. I wasn't getting paid in the beginning to help Mike through some of these things, to learn about traincoach.com, just because I wanted to put the podcast on. I'm like, Mike, can you give me access to the back end? Because I want to put the podcast on, because Ryan's people weren't doing it fast enough. So I was like, no, we need these people to get this. So that's how things happen. But those are three huge things you just said, and really in one sentence that were, if anybody's listening, that's the way you got to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. And you talk about, another one, a fourth one is find a mentor and someone who will, you think can help provide you opportunities. And like Mike obviously has been that for a lot of people. The way you described him, essentially getting you into strengthcoach.com. I mean, we started CFSC. Brendon and I didn't have two nickels to rub together when we started that business. That has grown into quite a great business for us. And but he gave us an opportunity to earn our equity through work that has continued to grow and become more valuable, and then us continue to buy out more equity in that company as people left, as Larrabee left, and as we've continued to grow. And I think you should recognize when you're young, like, who is someone that I want to be like. I remember looking at Mike, and you talk about streams of income. I remember being like, wow, he worked in professional sports. He has his own business. He gets to come in here and train, and then he has his family here. It seems like a good, everyday life for him. And then he has these online streams of income. I go, this seems like a really great way to live. So I just started kind of taking notes mentally, being like, okay, what do I have to do to kind of get to that? And if you have someone who can serve as like a muse, someone that you can learn from, and then even bit more beneficial if it's someone who, is very generous, like Mike has been to so many of us, to build a career, that's a home run. And so I always tell, interns, I say, this is obviously a good place to be for that. But if you're going to go to somewhere else in the industry, look for someone that will give you opportunities to grow, because it's so valuable when you have people who've been in this industry for so long who can kind of guide you the right way.
Yeah. And let's be honest, eventually it was just Mike being smart, because the three of us really had to do all the work.
Yeah. Exactly. Worked for everybody.
We made Mike a lot of money. Mike's no dummy.
Yeah. But but honestly, I can actually, it's a good analogy to like somebody who complains about an equinox or whatever a lifetime, right? Mm-hmm. And that lifetime or equinox, you're not paying rent there. You don't pay for marketing. You don't do it. You're sitting there and they're like, hey, here's a client. So they're providing so much. And, at Equinox, they gave us education. We had 3 levels. Geraldine was getting people like Mike and Lee Taft and all these people to come in and speak to us as well, right? So it's like, take what these people are giving you. Don't look that gift horse in the mouth. Stop. And again, that's really where the podcast came, when everybody was kind of crying about Mike. Oh, I got to pay $10 a month. Think about how this can also benefit you and how you can help as well. Like you just talked about with all that stuff. How do I grow the business? That's what you said. How do I help Mike grow the business? Some people are sitting there saying, oh, Mike Boyle, he's got all this stuff, and why do I got to help him grow the business? He should be helping me. Why shouldn't he be helping you? Like he will help you. He will help you a lot.
Yep.
Yeah.
Do the right thing.
Kevin, I heard you and Marco talking about. Sorry, I heard you and Marco talking about the more you give, the more you seem to get in return. So there's this really good book that came out during COVID. It's called Coaching Rules, and rule number 105 was the more I give, the more I seem to get in return. And I think that's exactly what the both of you are talking about. Like the more you invest in, even if it's someone else's gym or product or building somebody else up, the more you will receive in return in some sort of way. It might not be financial, but it could just be in connections. It could be in all sorts of ways. But when I hear you two talk about it, I brought it up because I heard you and Marco talk about it on the last podcast. So yeah, the more we all gave and the more we all continue to give, the more we seem to get in return.
Yes, that boomerang effect, right? I mean, I think that if you continually do that, people who you're benefiting will see you as valuable. Like you said, Mike looked at Anthony, looked at myself, looked at you, and the other people that worked there and thought like, oh, wow. Like if you have a really good employee, you're like, I'm going to do anything I can to keep this person and help this person have opportunities because it ultimately benefits you. And I think that sometimes, like you said, when you're young and you're an employee, you have to think like it's me, 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 me. And when that's a mindset that leads you to a dead end pretty quickly. Whereas if you can be patient and like you said, we were smart with our money early on. Brendon and I were like, we got to pay off our loans. We have to save money. And that allowed us, even though it was tough for a little while, to now, once you get through the other side of that, pursue opportunities because you don't have this albatross of student loans hanging on your back, which we had some significant ones, and all these other things because we gave ourselves kind of at least enough of a pillow underneath us to be successful. And that's really hard. And I think part of it is that we have all these young people who probably don't get a financial education and don't understand the basics of taxes or saving or investing. And I think that has really actually been a big part, I think, of why we've been able to do what we're doing because you're not, worrying as much about like, I need to get this next check. I need to get this next check. And I can pursue something I'm passionate about.
Yeah. Another thing is just kind of to kind of expand on that a little bit is, people are watching you, right? They're always watching you. And I think when you guys were in MBSC, for example, somebody is, all right, Mike's watching you, great. Bob's watching you, great. But then there's other trainers who are watching you. There's like longtime customers that might be going up to Bob and be like, these kids are working their ass off, whatever. So there's a lot of eyes on you. And then there's customers. I remember being in Equinox and people would come up to me and just be like, I love what you're doing. I loved what you did with that client, that warm up. I was doing Mark Verstegen's like world's greatest stretch and all that stuff. Right? And nobody was doing that right at the time. And so they were like, I love what you're doing with that person. Like, I was like, where did this, like, I didn't even think about it. Like, I was just focused on what I was doing and delivering the best value I could, right? The best training I could. And then people are watching. So it's the same thing. Mike's not going to trust you guys and that's a big part of it. Trust. He's got to trust us to go into business with us, right? And part of that is how you carry yourself and what you guys were doing there to be able to say, yeah, we're going to get checks for a certified functional strength coach. And I don't mind if Brendon gets it, but Kevin's going to spend it on, at the brewery down the street. You just have to pay there, actually. That's true.
See, that was another wise economic decision for me. Well, Anthony, you talk about coming in to the industry at 37. You obviously have like a more non-traditional background. For those who don't know, Anthony was in the bar business for a long time. But you came in and you've been very innovative or willing to change. You're someone who, like you said, the podcast, strengthcoach.com, strength conditioning webinars, your book, you have a brick and mortar facility that you
owned a gym.
were willing to sell and then pivot. Now you've completely changed locations. And so I think a lot of people aren't willing to be either innovative or to make changes or to take chances. And I don't know if that's a credit to you just of your personality or your businesses, the life that you used to be in, or if you can speak on, like, I've seen you change and try things, and that's 99% of being successful is trying an opportunity. And so if you could speak to your willingness to do that and kind of how you've continued to evolve.
Yeah, I think it's a good point. I always say, like, who would have thought? I would have now, all right, if you know me, I like to talk and whatever, but you would have, podcasting wasn't even a thing, right? Maybe you would have said, you should be a radio DJ or whatever, but not a podcaster, because podcasting didn't exist, right? So I think being open to those things and to understand that, you got to have some confidence. And I think having that growth mindset really helps, because when you go to like conferences or even watching them on, your iPad or whatever, when you're thinking about learning all the time, possibility comes up, right? You're starting to gain confidence. You're like, oh, wait. And then you see stories. You're like, this guy did this. Wow, that was pretty easy. And then, you hear things that might change the way you think. For example, somebody said, I forget what I think it's a guy from Sam Card. He had a great explanation. He's like, listen, you don't have to be the world's greatest expert. And I used to call that the Gray Cook effect, because I would see Gray and I'd be like, why am I even bothering in this business right now? Right? Like, this guy I'm never going to be as smart as Greg Rose or Mike, whatever. Like, they're starting out, they got a 15-year head start on me. But I think what you learn is, it's called the one-step approach, I think he called it. All you have to do is be one step ahead of the people you're trying to teach, right? Yeah. And so certain things like that, like Ray Edwards is a copywriter. He has a great quote that I love. He said, there's people out there that can only hear your voice. So don't worry about Mike Boyle. Don't worry about Gray Cook. Don't worry about Mark Verstegen. There's people out there that are like, what are those guys talking about? Right? Yeah. I got a friend who listens to the podcast. He's not in the business, but he likes to listen to the podcast. He skips over Mike's part. And he's like, oh, I can't, that guy, I don't like any of his, I don't like what he's saying. I don't even know, how does he even, and I'm thinking, that is the most popular part of the show. What are you talking about? Right? But there's there's people out there that can only hear your voice. So when I hear those things, I think, and again, it goes back to having that growth mindset. Right from the start, boys, I was in the bar business. I went to see Gray Cook and Peter Twist at the Jewish Community Center. I was still working in the bar business. I got certified to explore this. I saw Gray and Peter, and Gray, and you know what Gray said at the end of the lecture was like, there's 2 books you got to get. Functional Training for Sports just came out, Mike Boyle, and another one just came out, Core Performance from Mark Verstegen. And this is 2000, like maybe the end of 2003, early 2004, let's say, right? So I went out and got those books because I thought this guy Gray was amazing, and I was like, holy shit, these books, like, they spoke to me because I was older. It wasn't just killing yourself. It was like this, taking the sports idea, being safe, especially Core Performance, right? Like to the general pop. Mm-hmm. And then I was like, I'm doing this. That pushed me over the top. Those books pushed me over the top to do it. So I think having the growth mindset and, to keep growing, I think you'll be okay with change to know that I can learn this. I can do this. I don't know what a podcast, I didn't know what a podcast, yeah. If you got in a room with Kevin Larrabee and myself and talked about Audio Hijack Pro and the sound quality, Kevin probably can't listen to the Train Coach podcast because of the sound quality, right? Right? And God bless him for it, But his sound, he geeked out on that, right? And Kevin was one of the first ones to do a podcast in the fitness business, right? But his sound was amazing because he was into that. But so I think there's certain things that you just gotta say, you know what? I'm going to go with it. I'm going to do it. I'm going to try it. And I think that's having the growth mindset allows you to have confidence to try new things, to be able to fail and to be able to, kind of keep pushing forward. So, and having mentors like Mike, Mike was the first person to give me, I always say, people ask me, what do you like about Mike? And I always bring it back to early on. It was Mike gave me permission to admit I was wrong to my clients, right? To say, because I remember, I would never say, like, we're not doing sit-ups anymore. We can't, I wouldn't even tell them, right? But I would, once I started learning from Mike, I said, listen, I've learned a better way. I don't think sit-ups are really good for us. I've been doing them for a long time, but some research is coming out, and I think it might not be the best idea. I'm going to take them out of the program. So people respect that, right? But I would have never done that without Mike, to be honest with you, because Mike was they used to call him the flip-flopper, right? Yeah. I mean, he wasn't a flip-flopper. He was learning. This industry is so new. So I think that's really a long answer to how does that, but I think really having the growth mindset and being somebody who's a lifelong learner, it gave me the confidence to be able to, like, hey, the more you know, the more you realize you don't know shit, right?
Yeah. Very true.
So,
That might be in coaching rules too, Brendon. I don't know if that's is that a coaching rules point?
No, but it should be.
Rule number 34.
Rule
Is there
number
a number 2 coming in?
106.
It's
I think I'm gonna write a second edition. I will at some point. My next book is going to be Fitness Rules.
Oh,
written for the client, though.
Very good.
But more on that later.
Nice.
Well, Ant, you made a really big pivot just a couple of years ago, right? Like you've been a lifelong New York guy. Like I think in New York City, I always thought of Anthony Renna. And you sold your brick and mortar business.
Yeah.
And you moved out to Indianapolis, and now you're kind of into this online fitness space. 50 over 50, and targeting the like you said, because dad bods suck. And you've been rocking away out there. So what has that been like for you? And like kind of talk about what you're focusing on now, what you're putting your energy into now.
Yeah, I mean it's 54-50.
Yeah,
So
54-50.
Yeah, 50 days for being 50. For men in their 50s. It's a 50-day challenge for men in their 50s. And honestly, what it turned into, how it came about was when I turned 50, so I'm 55 right now. When I turned 50, I just sold the gym in December of 2016. And I was kind of out of shape. As you guys know, and you guys have probably gone up and down as well, is sometimes we're in this business and
as I am right now, yes.
Sometimes you get burnt out, and you're like, the last thing you want to do is, even if you own a gym, is be in the gym, and you want to go do something else. And so for me, I always say I had to sell my gym to get in shape. So I started to lose some weight. I signed up for the Crash Bees in Boston in February of 2017 with a client. And I just started doing that, and I lost like 10, 12 pounds. And then for my birthday, which is in March, I wanted to do this 50-day challenge of having a glass of wine every day, but trying to really focus on losing weight. Because I still wanted it to be within things that I wanted to do. Let's compare Don Saladino, who, by the way, helped me with my original 50 for 50, with my personal 50 for 50, with a meal plan and everything like that. But if you look at a Don Saladino, would I love to look like Don Saladino? Absolutely. But I know what it takes. I know what that cost would be. And Don is so immersed in it. He loves it. I mean, that's all he does. And he absolutely loves. You see the joy of like being in the gym, all his recovery, his cooking or whatever. That's not me. So for me, when I was, when I sold you guys the strengthcoach.com, and, if anybody is, I probably told the story, but we came up with a 2-year payment plan, which just ended. And that's part of why we're celebrating as well on the podcast. And that just ended.
Cheers.
So I need to get my, yes.
Not
really.
Not really.
Those checks aren't coming
Cheers,
in.
Kevin. Cheers, Kevin.
Yes.
So I wanted, when I was thinking about this over the last couple of years, what do I want to do moving forward, And so the podcast is really at a great place. I make more money on the podcast than, I've ever done, because I've had more time to spend on it. But I wanted to do something in fitness that really was part of my lifestyle. I don't want to be a phony. I don't want to be like, hey, do this, but don't drink, everybody, Don't drink, right? It's ridiculous. And so I wanted something where I knew there was men out there like me, men in their 50s who might have played sports, might have been in great shape, and kind of lost their way a little bit, keep saying they want to get back into it. And but don't want 5 days a week in the gym with body part splits. Don't want to be thinking about 24/7 about chicken and Tupperware and not being able to do the things that they want to do. So that's where this came up. Like, what is my lifestyle? Because all right, so the fact that I look young has nothing to do with fitness, right? That's genetics, right? I mean, let's be honest. Like, this head of hair is not from doing fucking deadlifts, right? So, but people would always be like, holy shit, you look great. Wow, I can't believe you're 55. Like everybody would always say that, or 54 or whatever, however old that was. So they would always ask me what I was doing. And then, I do a lot of stuff. Like you said, I got to have the dog. I'm always have a backpack on. I have 40 pounds on my back, or, I'm riding my bike to work, and I take the stairs every day. I live on the 4th floor. I lived on the 25th floor in New York. I took the stairs all the time. Right. So these are just things that I was doing that kind of kept me in shape without going to the gym 5 days a week, without, by having a couple. I don't get drunk every night, but I do like to have some bourbon, and I do want to have dessert with my wife or whatever. So, not every night, but I want to be able to do those things without saying, and guys, I got on that original 50 for 50, I got down to, like, for me, which was really good at 50 years old, like 13% body fat.
Nice.
And
wow,
it wasn't really like I was at from 16 to 13, which was the 50 days. I started at 16 and I went to 13, and I was like, is that all this is? All this bullshit I've been doing?
3%?
Yeah. So,
That's it.
I mean, so it's not like I'm 25 and I'm trying to impress people. But or a woman, like I'm trying to get married. I'm married, So it wasn't something where I was like, wow. And even my wife was like, nah, you're too thin. I don't like it now.
I don't like it now.
So, but yeah, so I wanted to do something that was in line with what my beliefs and how I want to live my lifestyle. Again, like an Allie Gilbert or Charlie or Don. I love those guys. I absolutely love them. It's just not the life that I want to live. I don't have no problem with it, with whatever they do or however they live their lives. I love it. They'll always be my friends, but it's like, I just can't relate to that piece of it. Like, I want to do other things. So that's where 50 for 50 came up. And it was like, how can we do these things by the morning walk, the evening walk? It's also about longevity, but that doesn't sell. I don't sell longevity, right? Because I'm not, I forget the guy's name, Peter Attia, or, the other guy that's not Matthew Walker. He's the sleep guy. Forget off the top of my head. But all of these things are going to help us throughout. And I think COVID was a big piece too. People started to realize, like, shit, I got to get my shit together. And I feel like we need to take that stuff into our own hands. So again, I wanted to come up with something that was in line with the way I do things, not too extreme, but still being in good shape, looking at things like blood work and looking at these things to be healthy.
Can you speak a little bit more to kind of the program, like how they sign up and kind of what's included or how it works a little bit?
Yeah. So basically it's kind of like I use the same platform as the old strengthcoach.com, right? So it's my old strength conditioning webinars license. So I use that because I don't know about you guys, but I don't need another Facebook group to join. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So that's what I love about having a forum. You got a question? We got a forum, right? You guys know it's awesome at strengthcoach.com. That's why it's better than Twitter. You can find it, right? Go on the forum. You can find it. We got a catalog. We also have articles on strengthcoach.com, right? There's so many better things. So same thing. I have the forum there. I have a program laid out of 3 days of total body strength and conditioning based off of the science. Like, let's get some high intensity work from anywhere. We start out week 1 or 2 from 15 to 20 minutes, right? And then I try to get them to do what I call a fat loss accelerator, just the basic zone 2 after the workout, after the high intensity stuff. And then, so that's 3 days a week, trying to get them to do some cardio, whatever zone 2, whatever they want, a couple days a week. And then slowly, kind of very PN nutrition style type behavioral change. So first week is the habit change of follow the schedule. We don't even just follow the schedule. I don't want you to do anything. Second week is add more protein. How much more? Just more, right? So they have a checklist for that. They can print out this big PDF and all the workouts are there. They can write down what they're doing for workouts. They can write down what they did for everything. And there's a checklist. Each week it gets bigger, right? Did you follow the schedule? Did you have a little more protein than you used to have? Third week is have 16 ounces of water when you wake up, right? We all say half your body weight in ounces, right? But that's a little too much for some people that are just kind of getting back into it. So like, hey, can you have some water? If you can't have 16, have 8, right? So that's how I do it. It's everything is kind of contained. Like they log in, there's videos, they go to, week 1, day 1, there's the program on the platform with all the videos, or they can download the PDF. So if it's somebody like us who has some training age, just need to be like, oh yeah, I know what a bridge is, I know what a goblet squat is. Great. I don't need to watch videos, but you could just download the PDF and do that. So it's all contained within the site. It's 50 days. It's not just 50 for 50, to be honest. It's after that, there could be 50 more. Then there's another 50. There's 50 strong. So there's probably going to be 50 golf, 50 tennis, 50 pickleball. I don't know, right? So things that maybe men in their 50s are looking at. Mm-hmm. But it's really just kind of, for me, guys, it's more about start. Like, you know what? If you want, go to the Ali Gilberts and the Don Saladinos after you do this. I want to get you guys started. I want to, Brendon, what's your mission again? I always loved your mission about fitness. Like, can you tell us your mission?
I have 2. So Kevin's got the movement as medicine. My mission statement is to make physical activity the number 1 prescribed drug in the world by 2055, because that's the day I retire.
Okay. So, yeah. So I love that idea. And that's a very similar thing. Like, you just want people to move, right? So I'm trying to get them to do, like, NEAT is a big part of it for me on the 50 for 50 challenge. So we do really basic exercises. Also, there's no power involved because a lot of us have knee problems. Right? A lot of us, the number 1 complaint. What do people complain about? I don't have a gym membership. I don't have a lot of equipment. I don't have a lot of time. Even my social media now, like, I do 1 tool Wednesday. Like, I'm taking away the excuses. You say you don't have a lot of, here's 1 dumbbell. Here's a body weight. Here's a ruck. Here's a sandbag. I don't even use a bench when I have the dumbbells. I use the floor because I say it's 1 tool. I can't use the bench because I'm going to get the complaint. So I'm showing you in a box what you can do, right? So that's really what I tried to do with the workouts, too, and to totally progress it really slowly, get them back into it. So it's a different personality. It's not the guy who's going to be like, yeah, let's go, man. I want to get a 6-pack and let me show you my, It's not that guy. It's not that person. So, and then that's more like me. Although, let's be honest, if I had a 6-pack, I would never wear a shirt again. So, I mean, I'm not going to.
Me too.
I'm not going to lie.
Me too.
So.
Unbelievable, Anthony. This was really great. We do have a segment that we do at the end of every episode that I actually did not clue you in on, but it's good because I know you'll be able to answer. And it's our book recommendation segment. Yeah, well, I was going to promote his book.
Let me get a little more.
Yeah, we always recommend 1 book at the end and link it out in the notes. And honestly, we're going to link yours out anyways. But we did mention "Be Like the Best" by Anthony Renna. It's a great book. I tell you, it's a resource. You can pop it open. Actually, it's not down here. I have another bookshelf upstairs, but I have it at the coffee table along with a couple other ones because it's one that people, when people come over, also a lot of non-fitness people will be like, "Ooh, be like the best," right? And then they'll open it and they'll be like, "Who's this person? Who's this person?" And I just wait till they get to me. But honestly, "Be Like the Best" is an amazing resource for people to be able to pick up. To every day, hey, I'm going to read this interview. I'm going to read the, be like Brendon section, and see, how I can improve my life or improve my career. So that would be my book recommendation. Very fitting, for Anthony on here. So, Brendon, maybe go next so then Anthony can think of what his answer is going to be.
All right. So I recently read Dopamine Nation by Anna. Is it Lembke? I think Anna Lembke. So she's a Stanford psychologist, and she's the whole book is each section or each chapter. She talks to somebody who has a severe psychological issue or addiction, actually, and what you find is that we can all relate to these addictions in some way. But many of these people have they're just not able to stop, and they need more help than the average person. But then you realize that we all have our own addictions. It's just, are your addictions acceptable to society, and do you have control over them? And it's to say that addiction it's not necessarily a bad thing. We all have the thing, like Anthony was talking about. I have these things that I like that I don't want to give up. It's just that some of us have better impulse control than others, but we all have our addictions. So it was a fascinating book. And then she gets into the brain science of everything and the history of these things. So I really, really liked it. It's Dopamine Nation.
Was she on Huberman podcast too? Is that because I thought he recommended that book?
Yes, she was. She was. Yeah, and so I recently listened to that podcast, and he recently did one with Lane Norton as well. Mm-hmm. That was very, very good. So, yeah, but that's Anna Lembke. If anyone wants to go check that out,
I would. I'm just going to go with 2-1. So I got to give 2.
Let's go.
So Building a Story Brand.
Yep.
By Donald Miller, to me, is one of the best things as a young business, even an old one, but to understand your message and to clearly communicate that is something that I think everybody needs to learn to do right away. And Building a Story Brand, and even with what he talks about with a website, right? So the grunt test. So it's all what's above the fold. So when you go to a website, what's above the fold, what you see. In 5 seconds, do I know what you do, what you can do for me, and what my next step is? So when you can communicate that clearly, and we don't have to tell Brendon this because he's living with Jenny, who really
the master
helps people. Yeah, she's a master at this. And so, but the Building a Story Brand stuff is so good for anybody, even if you don't have a website, just to understand, like, so if somebody asks you, what do you do, to be able to say in a really, like, I help men over 50 kind of get their lives back through a 50-day challenge, right? Let's just say that for 50 for 50, that's what I do. When it was the Strength Coach podcast, I help fitness professionals become successful and make an impact in the world. When you can understand that, you're answering a lot of questions in your business as well. So when things come up, you could say, is this going to help me impact, help fitness professionals become successful and make an impact in the world? No, I probably shouldn't do it. Like, is this podcast right for me? No. So I love that idea from Donald Miller. I think he's brilliant. His whole Business Made Simple stuff is really amazing. And he's trying to his mission is to make colleges irrelevant, right, for business college, right? So you could just go on his website and get these courses and learn about everything, that you need to know. And then really quick, do the work, Stephen Pressfield. I think, going back to Kevin asking about changing and being able to, try these new things, do the work. And I would say read it is good, but you got to listen. The guy's got a great voice.
Yep.
And listen to Do the Work. I've listened to that book 6 or 7 times. I've actually had a notepad out to reframe certain businesses that I've tried or done. And Do the Work is amazing, just to kind of get you off your ass and start doing the work, because the resistance in your head, which you talked about, that resistance, you always have to overcome that resistance in whatever you do. We all have it. Mike and I just talked about imposter syndrome on the anniversary edition, and we all have it. Mike has it. We all have it. And so I think Do the Work will help you get over some of that stuff.
Amazing. Good recommendations. We'll put all of those into the show notes, along with links to all of the places you can find Anthony. Anthony, where can people find you if they're listening right now?
For the 50 for 50 stuff, it's just 50for50.fit. Pretty easy. Or you could go to continuefit.com and strengthcoachpodcast.com. They take you to the same place. Strengthcoach.com is really that'll give you my thing. But for my new project is 50 for 50.
Awesome. Well, both of you, thank you for hopping on here and sharing a drink with me tonight. This was great, and always happy to talk to both of you. And this will be out sometime next week. So thanks a lot, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks, Anthony.
Appreciate it.